Hey guys, I watched this video today and it kind of set me off because the arguments that are being made here, they're just flat out false. It's misleading, and this guy's a former federal prosecutor. All right, let's give it a listen, and I'm going to interrupt in between and give my own opinion.
All right, joining me now is Paul Butler. He's a former federal prosecutor and an MSNBC legal analyst. He's the author of the very important book, Chokehold, Policing Black Men. Now, Paul, this is a complicated issue. There's no question. Cash bail is different in different places. It doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. But let's use a New York example. In 2010, there was a 16-year-old boy, Khalif Browder. He was arrested for allegedly stealing a backpack. He was put in Rikers.
All right, first off, let me start this off. The kid was 16 years old, stole a backpack. What the hell is he doing in Rikers? On that part, they don't even argue that. On that part, I say that he should have never gone to Rikers.
Jail. He and his family couldn't afford to post the $3,000 bail. Now, there were all sorts of reports that he was severely abused, he was tortured, he was beaten up. He spent 3 years in Rikers, some of it in solitary confinement. And then the charges against him were dropped.
Unreal.
Suffered from PTSD, and he took his own life 2 years later at the age of 22. Just one example in, I don't know, you must have.
He picked the most extreme example that they could find. Trust me on that.
Thousands of examples of why people don't get the same treatment based on whether they have money or not.
Here we go.
Yeah, so in these Trump-related prosecutions,
TDS.
Ali, we're seeing all these elite white people becoming
This is racist.
in a criminal legal system that was largely designed for poor people and people of color like Khalif Browder.
No, it wasn't.
So Trump is half right when he complains about two systems of justice. The criminal legal system is broken, but the real victims are not rich and powerful lawyers like John Eastman and Rudy Giuliani, who have no problem making their bail.
This guy's an idiot.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars. The real victims are people like Khalif Browder. Huge number of people in jail lived below poverty.
First off, Trump is talking about communist prosecutors who are making up false charges against their party's political opponents. That's what's happening to Trump and the, 19 others? Essentially, Fani Willis is loudly saying that the victims of her abuse of power tried to overturn the 2020 election. But in her charging documents, she is saying that these people exercised their free speech rights and her party didn't like it. What this guy is arguing about is the bail system. And I think that these guys, they hate Trump, but they want to use his name every time they can. It's like before Trump was hated when he started running for president, it's like every rapper wanted to figure out a way to rhyme Trump's name in, right? Well, that's what these guys are doing now. The bail system is a completely different argument. In the case that this guy talked about, if bail was set at $3,000 for a young black person, and in the exact same jurisdiction, if the charges and circumstances were so similar that the nuances didn't matter, and it was set lower for a non-black person, then yes, you have an argument, and I would stand up with you. But for this guy, who was supposedly a former federal prosecutor, to compare what Trump said about a two-tiered system of justice makes me wonder if when God was handing out brains, was this guy standing in line holding a thimble? And as for the young man who was abused and tortured in prison, it's easy to make the argument that because he couldn't make bail, that those things happened to him. And the poor guy eventually took his life. I don't like any part of that story. But that's not a good argument against the bail system. All right, let's continue.
Before they got locked up, most can't afford even the $10,000. That's the average bail. So, Ali, I get why to a lot of people it would seem so unfair if Donald Trump or Sidney Powell were incarcerated for the months or years leading up to their trials. But that's the world that 650,000 Americans live in right now. They're presumed innocent,
But there's a difference here, pal. The difference is that Trump is being charged with made-up crimes. They're not crimes. You're allowed to say that you think an election was stolen. You're allowed to call a Secretary of State and say, out of all the fraudulent data that you found in an analysis of the voter data, find me this many. He's allowed to say that. So this argument is completely moot, what he's saying.
they're still in prison, not because they're guilty, but because they're poor.
So what's the solution, Paul? Most people would say, all right, what's the incentive?
So now he's making the argument that because some people worked harder in life to earn more money and have more wealth than others, that it's a problem that they can afford bail, but poorer people cannot. What the anti-bail people seem to misunderstand is what bail is really for. Bail is set at an amount that will ensure that the defendant shows up for court, because someone is putting up that money for them, and they would lose it if the person didn't show up for court, if he took off. Okay, the accused is not the one putting the money out in most cases. Either family members or friends go to a bail bondsman, or they get the family together to pool money and they put it up for bail. Bail is not supposed to be the end-all be-all way to get out of jail before your trial. If you can't pay bail, then the system is not going to allow you to walk until your trial. Now, ROR, which is released on your own recognizance, is something that if you're a first-time offender, or if the charge is so low that it's not a threat, I mean, they'll let you go until your trial. Now, I don't know all of the circumstances of this young man who stole a backpack. Okay, I think $30,000, because it's usually 10% that you pay. I think $30,000 for a backpack. Now, I don't know if this kid had priors. Like, why was he put into Rikers? Does Rikers have a juvenile system there? I don't know. I'm sorry, but it is wrong to say that people who live in poverty and are in the justice system for something they're being accused of doing, that does not make them a victim of the system. Trump and the other 19 are victims of a system that is being abused by a communist prosecutor. It's a completely different argument from what this clown is saying. They are victims because if the system wasn't abused by Fani Willis, then they would not be charged with crimes because they did not commit any crimes. All right, this next part is what just drove me crazy. Here you go.
Most people would say, all right, what's the incentive? You've been charged with something. There's evidence to move ahead with a trial against you. We'd like you to show up. It's not in the state's interest to incarcerate all these people. It's way more expensive. If you can't make $500 or $1,000 bail and you have to sit in jail like Khalif Browder did for all that time, that's way more expensive to the state than something else. So what is a reasonable solution? What's the incentive to say you need to show up for jail if you're charged with something?
Here we go.
For your trial if you're charged with something?
Listen to this.
As more and more jurisdictions, 3 states are doing, one solution is to end cash bail. The vast majority of people.
Did you hear this? End cash bail. In other words, end bail, which is what they did in New York. And look what's happening there. It's a war zone. Now he's going to say something here that just.
Who are released before trial, don't commit crimes when they're out, and they show up for their court date.
What about the one that doesn't show up and he goes out and he murders someone? What about that one?
Simple fixes like texting defendants to remind them when they're supposed to be in court.
I didn't get your text. I got a new phone. Can you imagine the arguments from this idiot? So instead of bail, which pretty much assures that you're going to show up because you don't want to screw over your family members, right? So we're just going to text you.
Work better than cash bail, which is great for billionaires like Donald Trump, but a huge barrier.
Do you hear this asshole? He keeps mentioning Donald Trump. Guys, people like this used to be a federal prosecutor. Let that sink in. All right, make sure to subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, and share our videos with like-minded friends who want to stay informed about what's really going on. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and as always, remember to read between the lines and the lies. Thanks for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.
Another way to begin the story would be to start from the end. There's nothing left of the dream.